Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. I'm Julie Lockman, and I just want to welcome you here on behalf of the West Virginia Clinical and Translational Science Institute. This is our first segment in our scientific communication series for Research Boot Camp, and you can see the schedule up here on the screen. So kind of set aside those Fridays so that you can attend. There is something for everybody coming up. We're focusing on writing to start with, and those second and fourth segments, and then we'll move into presenting, and we may add one onto this. We're still working that out as far as presenting. Today our session here is really to help you, to guide you, prepare you for submitting proposals for grants. And so we have, our presenters have a wealth of knowledge and experience to share with you, and lots of resources on the table outside. So if you did not pick those up, be sure to get them as you leave, because you will want to keep those for when you're ready. And let me move to their title slide here and just introduce our speakers. Dr. Ann Hatfield. She, over the last 13 years, has been involved with research administration in many ways, from a professional funded by a grant to an administrator of several subawards to various community organizations to a central administrator. In 2011, Dr. Hatfield was recognized as a certified research administrator as well as a certified pre-award research administrator by the Research Administrators Certification Council. In 2012, Dr. Hatfield earned her doctorate in educational leadership, higher education administration from Marshall University, and currently she is the research development coordinator for the West Virginia Clinical and Translational Science Institute, so she's one of our own. As the research development coordinator, she assists our members as well as personnel with various aspects of research administration associated with the CTSI project as a whole and those projects that we fund, and also just members who are seeking external funding. And so some of her services, she'll talk about these, but finding funding opportunities, which many of you are probably interested in, pre-award and proposal development, post-award and award administration, research administration training, other resources, guideline policy development, and guideline and policy interpretation. Okay? And then we also have Valerie Lemasters here with us, and she has worked at West Virginia University Health Sciences Center for 43 years, with 26 years in pre-award and grants administration. Her initial role was to review and approve all School of Medicine extramural grant proposals before they were submitted to the Office of Sponsored Programs. She did this on behalf of the Dean of the School of Medicine and the Health Sciences Vice President's Office. At that time, she also reviewed and approved protocols that were being submitted to the Institutional Review Board and the Animal Care and Use Committee prior to those submissions. Now, when the School of Medicine basically when the School of Medicine Office of Research and Graduate Studies expanded to a Health Sciences Center-wide office, Valerie took on the role of pre-award advisor and approver on behalf of the HSC, Vice President for Research on Grant Submissions for all colleges HSC-wide. These are people that you want to get to know, and so take the chance to do that, and I will gladly hand this over to Dr. Hatfield to get started.
Thank you, Dr. Lockman, for that wonderful welcome. First, we're just going to go over our learning objectives for today. What we're going to offer today are just high-level details. Valerie and I, is that a little loud? Sorry. Okay. Today, we're just going to provide high-level details regarding sponsored programs administration, engaging in sponsored research within the Health Science Center. We're just going to, again, hit the high-level details. Valerie and I could talk for days, but since this is a Friday afternoon, I'm sure you would like to spend your weekend pursuing other things than talking about research administration. So first, we're going to improve the awareness of the Health Service Administration or the Research Administration services available here at the Health Science Center. And our outcome for today is to provide a basic understanding from the beginning of the process to the end to you, the members of the HSC research community. The focus of this presentation primarily is for the Health Science Center research community, but there's a lot of good information for our colleagues in Charleston as well as Lewisburg. And my caveat before I start getting into the presentation, my standard answer, as well as Valerie's, is usually going to be, it depends. There are so many variables involved with research administration. Each situation can be unique. Also, some of our other favorite topics, understanding the compliance issues. When you engage in sponsored research activity, whether as a faculty member or as a research administration, in each scenario you need to apply federal regulations, the sponsor's guidelines, specific or unique guidelines pertaining to a specific sponsored opportunity, as well as WVU institutional policies and procedures. So it depends. There was a study conducted in 2012 that looked at the faculty workload for those faculty members engaging in sponsored research activity. When you become a principal investigator, and that is a faculty member who's engaging in a sponsored research project, you are called a principal investigator. You're contributing to science, but also you assume a dual role as being a research administrator for that specific project. So when you are a faculty member, 58% of your time on average is involved with the science, the research. But the 42% of your time you're going to be involved in research administration activities. Those include proposal preparation, pre-award administration, post-award administration, and report preparation. So you've heard me mention this phrase a lot. What is a sponsored project? And here are some general terms. It's an externally funded project in which you have a defined scope of objectives or an area of interest. Sometimes we do collect facility administrative costs as a part of doing business and engaging in research as an institution. And the awards are made to the institution on behalf of you, the faculty members. Some other qualifiers or hallmarks of a sponsored project. It has a defined start date and end date. Usually you are responding to a request for proposals, the acronyms RFP, RFAs, FOAs. There's a whole host of acronyms, and on the CTSI website we do kind of have a commonly used acronyms for your use later on. A proposal or sponsored project usually requires a detailed budget, and we'll get into some of those components of the detailed budget in a few minutes. And sometimes you're required to have certain regulatory components, human subjects, laboratory animals, radioactive or hazardous materials, recombinant DNA, carcinogens, pathogens, proprietary materials, and it depends. Sometimes there's intellectual property and other items within a sponsored project. How do we get the funding here? There are several types of mechanisms to receive funding from a sponsor for a sponsored project. The most common are grants, contracts, and cooperative agreements. Each one of these funding mechanisms have varying degrees of autonomy for you, the principal investigator. With a grant, an assistance agreement is received by the institution that provides money, property, or other tangible or intangible materials to WVU so that you can conduct your research. You as the PI are the driving force of the goals, objectives of the research or the specific aims of the sponsored project. So that is the highest level autonomy, so to speak, for you as the principal investigator. The contract, that is where is a set agreement with a start date and end date. There are clearly defined deliverables. The sponsor sets the research goals and objectives and what you will accomplish. Cooperative agreement is in which the sponsor and you, the PI, are basically equal partners. Both entities are involved with setting the goals and objectives of the research and work together to produce research outcomes or whatever sponsored activity you're engaging in with the sponsor. There are some other types, of course. There are interagency, intergovernmental agreements, IPAs, which are interagency personnel agreements, memos of understanding, subawards, subcontracts, and my personal favorite acronym are GOGOs, which are government-operated, government-owned facilities. So to begin the journey in engaging in sponsored activity, you first have to find funding. And these are some of the many services, as Dr. Lockman alluded to at the beginning, that we offer within the Health Science Center and within the West Virginia CTSI. And that's, again, we don't say, okay, sorry, you have 42% of these research administration responsibilities without supporting you, the research community. And this is an ongoing process, from finding funding, developing the proposal, applying for funding, receiving funding, conducting the research of the project, concluding the project, and you can start over, finding new funding. And I wanted to emphasize this is an ongoing, continuous process for you, the researcher. And here are some of the funding opportunities. Grants.gov is the federal portal. Not only can you find funding opportunities for all 26 federal agencies, this is the web portal used to submit your proposal to those 26 agencies. There's also an NIH funding listserv. In that's a weekly notification that comes directly from the National Institutes of Health to you, to your email, or however you want to designate that. And it provides not only funding opportunities, but changes in funding opportunity, changes in policies, and other important notifications that may affect your engagement in that sponsored project funding opportunity. This one I think would be of interest to many of you in the room. This is the NIH Extramural Loan Repayment Program. They call them LRPs. $35,000 of your qualified student loans can be repaid if you apply to this specific funding opportunity. And each year you can apply for one of these 5 general areas: clinical research, pediatric research, health disparities research, contraception and infertility research, and clinical research for individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds. And if you just Google that or go to the NIH website, and also I think some of this information or the materials outside, you can apply each and every year for that. Pivot is a subscription service that is provided by WVU to anyone with a wvu.edu email account. Pivot, you put in certain search terms, your area of interest, and it will provide you funding opportunities. You can also have that automated and sent to you each and every week. And there's some other features. If you're interested in learning more about Pivot, I wear several hats, and I'm also the Pivot trainer and can help set up your account, or if there's any problems with your account, please contact me at any time. And the last general funding opportunity is called PCORI, and that stands for Patient-Centered Outcomes Research. So if you are a clinician that wants to engage in research, they also have 5 areas of interest, and they're very similar to the NIH loan repayment program that you may be interested in. This isn't an inclusive list, but these are the most common used here within the Health Sciences Center. And I'm going to turn it over to Val.
Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about the types of proposals that are submitted. When you're preparing a new proposal, you can be responding to a solicitation for a solicited proposal, and that's basically a response to a request for a proposal or a funding opportunity announcement. And there are specific subject matters that they want to have research or training programs or the project to be addressing. And so that would be a solicitation or solicited. There's also unsolicited announcements, and those basically are subject to the interest of the principal investigator, as well as interesting to funding agencies. And with PHS applications or NIH, there's always a parent announcement that would be attached to that. So you would be looking for parent announcements if you're going to be submitting for something like an R01, which is your standard research grant, or fellowship grants, F31s, F32s. There's also renewals, and there are competing renewals, which basically are for a currently approved project that's ending that's nearing the end of the performance period, and they include new work based on results that you've found from your current project, and they're subject to peer review. And then there's also resubmission, and these are basically proposals that you've submitted. They've gone through peer review, and you've gotten critiques back. You didn't get funding that time, but you've gotten critical comments back with critiques. And so once you address that address those in your proposal and do rewrites, then you could submit for a resubmission. Now, some sponsors limit resubmissions, some sponsors don't allow resubmissions, and then others leave it pretty much wide open as far as resubmissions. In addition, there are revisions, which are basically competing supplements, and this is basically for an expanded scope of work on a project that's currently funded. And the one thing you have to remember about a revision, and when you're asking for this competing supplemental funding, is you cannot have the sole purpose of this request be to just basically restore funding that maybe was administratively cut at the time of award, but it needs to be based on an increase in scope or some change in the project, and it can't be submitted until you've actually got an award in hand for the parent project. And it can't extend beyond the project period of the funded parent project for which you're going in for a competing supplement. There are also administrative supplements, and when you're applying for an administrative supplement, that needs to be in concert with the program officer and the grants management officer. And then there's the continuation, which is basically your non-competing renewal. If you've got a multi-year grant and you've got 3 or 5 years worth of funding recommended for the project. Typically you get the first year's worth of funding, and then when you near the end of that part of the project period, you have to go in with a progress report and go in for your non-competitive renewal for that next year of recommended funding. These are not peer-reviewed processes for this part. Now, when we think of the proposal, we normally think about a complete full proposal. And it normally follows a very standard format, and the content and the formatting are defined in each solicitation. When you're submitting new, competing, renewal, or resubmission, you're basically looking at full proposals. It's important to thoroughly review the solicitation for special instructions, because if you're applying through grants.gov, for instance, you're going to be using the SF424 form or grants.gov application package. And there's a book of instructions that are probably about 1.5 inches thick for the forms themselves, but the solicitations, or the RFPs or FOAs as they're called, will also contain special instructions that you will need to pay close attention to when you're putting together your application. Now, in addition to these standard types of proposals, there are a couple other things that I do want to mention. One is the letter of intent. Some agencies will require you to submit a letter of intent just primarily for their planning purposes, so that they know what they're going to be looking at for the deadline, how to plan for reviews, and that sort of thing. There are also letters of intent that are competitive, and you'd have to be invited to submit the full proposal. So if you're in a competitive process, you'd wait for the response from that agency as to whether you can submit the proposal or not. In a letter of intent, you don't typically have a budget request. You may have a total budget amount that you can request, but you aren't required to put a detailed budget in. And in those situations, the investigator can submit those letters of intent directly to the sponsor. However, sponsored programs does ask that they receive a copy of that letter of intent so that they have that information in case they're contacted by the funding agency instead of the principal investigator. Then they know that that's coming. If the letter of intent requires any sort of sponsor approval before they'll accept it, those types of things those letters have to be processed the same as you would a grant application through the electronic blue sheet system. And you need to plan in internal deadlines so that they get into queue for review and submission just like any other grant application would. And there's also some corporations won't want a full proposal, and they want basically a letter proposal, and sometimes those can be 3 to 5 pages in length. And basically it's just a brief description of your project, the goals and objectives, the institution information, and an actual budget request. Now, this type of letter proposal is your actual proposal. It's not like a letter of intent. It is the request to get the money. So basically, those have to be processed the same as any other proposal through the internal processing. Okay, the next thing are forms and application packages. As Dr. Hatfield referred to earlier, the grants.gov portal is one of the large portals that many of our grants go through. And when you download packages, you're downloading them directly from the specific announcement to which you're wanting to apply. And those SF42 forms then can basically be downloaded from grants.gov. There are also other organizations such as the American Heart Association. They have their own website on which you actually would go into, fill out your application, and then you still have to fill out your internal blue sheet and process it through WVU, and sponsored programs would actually be doing the submission. And there's also Proposal Central. There's a variety of sources to obtain these forms and application packages. Now, dealing with proposal preparation, you'll want to work closely with the departmental staff if the department provides staff support for research efforts. Not all departments do have staff dedicated to doing this. And in those situations, if you're a CTSI member, you should take advantage of services through CTSI. Also, if anyone's a member of the Cancer Center faculty or a member of the MBRCC, they also have pre-award services available through Winnebeth Smith. And so those sources would be available if you're members of either of those. Basically, the thing that I can stress the most is that you need to have as much advance notice as possible so that all these folks have the opportunity to assist you if you need their help. And you need to develop a timeline incorporating all of these internal deadlines. I know it sounds like a lot of time, but it's really important if you want to enlist other people's help to give them the opportunity and the time to be able to do it. One other thing that is to your advantage is if you have mentors or colleagues that have successfully competed for and received funding, and potentially maybe even in the same subject matter, if you can get some internal review of your science, that's invaluable. Now, the proposal submission process. Okay, so you've obtained your application package and you've read the FOA, you've read the solicitation carefully, and you've read the solicitation again. I can't stress enough the importance of following those solicitations very carefully because they can impact greatly whether your proposal is going to go through one of these electronic systems efficiently and error-free. Now, when you're dealing with grants, they basically differ greatly from contracts in that they don't involve the sponsor in the conception of the idea or the implementation of the proposal activities. And grants tend to be more flexible than contracts because they have fewer restrictions and conditions attached to them usually. The proposal itself has to convince the sponsor that the project's consistent with their interests and priorities, that the PI has the training and the expertise to be able to complete the project and achieve the goals, and that the proposed project is feasible and the investment is a good investment for their resources. The form and content of the proposals depended on both the types of programs proposed and the prospective sponsor priorities. Also, if you're dealing with an announcement from a PHS federal agency or any other agency that names a program contact, it's always a good idea to make contact with that program officer if you can and give them a brief idea of what your project is to see if it fits with their priorities at the time. You can obtain invaluable information with these informal contacts. When you're completing your proposal, there's going to be a lot of, or not a lot, but there's going to be institutional information that is needed for your application. And this information is basically all in one place on the Sponsored Programs website. And we've got their actually their web address on one of the little cards on the resource table. If you contact Sponsored Programs, actually, if you go on their website and look for frequently requested information for WVU Research Corporation, it includes all of that pertinent information. It also includes our current rate agreement, which defines our fringe benefit rates and our current F&A rates. And those are going to be important things when you're developing your budgets. Now, the next part of the process is to actually submit your application through our internal online system, which is called the EBS, or Electronic Blue Sheet. And it's basically the current way that we have of submitting all of our external proposals through to the Office of Sponsored Programs. The Office of Sponsored Programs is actually the group that submits the proposal to the sponsor. It shouldn't be submitted directly by the investigator. When you're processing the EBS, there are going to be a number of questions that have to be filled out as far as the title of your project, the name of the sponsor, deadline dates, etc. And so that sort of information is valuable in getting things organized so that Sponsored Programs knows how to queue it up as far as submission. All but the scientific narrative of your application needs to be in final format and uploaded in EBS as a supporting document at the time it's submitted to the Health Science Center office for review. It has to be reviewed and approved at the departmental level before our office actually takes a look at it and does our review process. The internal deadlines basically 8 days before a sponsor deadline, you want to have your proposal ready and at this point approved by your department so that the Health Science Center office has 3 days to review. And during that 3-day review time, we're looking at things such as making sure that the information in the electronic blue sheet match what's in the proposal, to also, if it's a special solicitation, review the solicitation and make sure that what the sponsor is requesting is actually contained in your application, to make sure that with electronic applications that the file names and the naming conventions follow all the rules that are specified by the sponsor. And we look at page limits, font size, margins, biographical sketch formatting, and any other additional information that's in that solicitation that the sponsor wants to see. This is more or less a double check because sometimes when you're so close to this proposal, it's difficult sometimes to see where maybe things are missing. And so hopefully this is a service that you'll avail yourself of in a timely fashion so that we can perform a thorough review. Now, the one thing about the EBS process that I want to point out, there's a section in EBS for approvers. And that section, this was actually a short term, and anybody that's been around here for very long understands short term can go on for a long time. But the EBS was a short term fix for making it available for sponsors to be able to process things electronically and not have to carry things around for signatures like we used to do in years past. And the approver section does not pre-populate. So there's nothing in there that ties any approvers to a department name or to an investigator name, but whoever's completing that EBS, the PI, or if they have support staff putting the EBS together, has to know who to put in for approvers. We do have a list of approvers, and we've provided a copy on the resource table, but I'd also recommend that you bookmark that on Sponsored Programs webpage because it does periodically change. But each department and college have named approvers. Sometimes it's department chair, sometimes it's administrative staff. So whoever's completing that EBS needs to know, based on that listing, who to put in for approvers. Now for the School of Medicine, I am the approver for the dean, and I'm also the approver for the Health Science Center vice president. So basically any proposal that goes out of the Health Science Center or that someone from the Health Science Center is collaborating on, maybe from another campus, any of those EBS proposals need to have me listed as an approver. Once all of those issues, if there are any issues, have been resolved and I can affix the approval to the EBS, then the principal investigator will get a notification that the approvals, that the EBS has been approved by approvers and it's ready to submit to sponsored programs. At that point, before you push that submit button that has just magically appeared, because it's not on the form until all the approvers are in place, at that point, the investigator wants to make sure that they have uploaded a complete final copy of their proposal package, because if you remember, at the time it comes to us, you can still have scientific narrative in draft format. But once you've made sure that it's complete and final and everything's done that you want to have done in that proposal, then you can click that Submit to Sponsored Programs button. Your proposal is not submitted to sponsored programs until that button is pushed. Now, before we move on to working with sponsored programs, I do want to mention one thing about PHS agencies and NIH, and that's called just-in-time. It's a just-in-time process. There are materials such as other support, IRB approvals, Animal Care and Use Committee approvals, biohazard approvals. Any of your regulatory approvals aren't required at the time of submission. You will have sections in your proposal that describe human subject involvement or describe animal involvement, but those actual approvals won't be required at the time of submission of your proposal. However, with NIH, for example, just in time means if they have reviewed your proposal and have decided that it's within funding range. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to get funding if you get one of these just-in-time requests. But if you're in a funding range, then you may get a just-in-time request from the sponsor saying, we want this other support information for your key personnel, we want all of your IRB approvals, we want all of those regulatory documents in place, and they may request several other pieces of information if they need it at that time. The important thing to know about this is just-in-time requests are usually have a very short turnaround time. So I would recommend when you submit a proposal not to wait until you hear that you might be in funding range to submit your IRB protocols or your Animal Care and Use Committee protocols, because at that point it's going to be too late, because if you get a just-in-time request and have to turn it around in a week, there's no way you're going to have those approvals in place. So as soon as you submit your proposal and it's feasible, I would go ahead and take care of those regulatory issues to be prepared in the event that you get a just-in-time request. Now, when we're working with office-sponsored programs, they're basically the centralized institutional office that takes care of pre-award in particular. And some of the basic services they provide are budget assistance, review and submission of proposals, they review and negotiate awards, they establish awards, they prepare subcontracts, assist with project management, and coordinate project closeout. Now for the pre-award side, sponsored programs request a 5-day turnaround. So basically 5 days out, full business days out from your agency deadline, they need to have that EBS with your completed proposal and all supporting documentation in complete and final format submitted to them with all of those approvals in place. They're going to also look at reviewing solicitations, doing some of the same and similar things that I've already done to it, but it's an extra set of eyes. They also have experience with doing the actual submissions, so they know what causes something to kick back. They know what causes error messages. They know what causes warnings. And so they're going to be able to help facilitate making sure that your proposal is complete and in a form that will allow you to submit an error-free application. And that's basically what the sponsor requires to be considered meeting the deadline. You have to submit your application by the deadline, and it has to be error-free. If you wait until closer to the deadline, sponsored programs will do their very best to try and help get the proposal submitted, but the services they provide will not be what they could provide if they were given the full 5 days to be able to do their review. They have a lot of experience, and they really want to be part of the team that helps support research and the research community. So basically, to close on this section, I just want to say that I am available for assistance if you contact me in advance and allow me time to help. Ann is available through CTSI. There are people in Cancer Center if you're Cancer Center faculty. Some departments do have their own departmental staff, but the important thing is as soon as you know you're going to apply for something, please start seeking assistance and notify people that can give you the benefit of their experience.
Thank you, Valerie. And just one piece of interesting trivia. On average, because I used to work there, the Office of Sponsor Programs pre-award individuals, each and every one of them submit over or close to 300 proposals per pre-award person per year. So just try to keep that in mind. And again, they are there to support you as well as Valerie and myself and the other research administrators within the Health Science Center. Okay, my favorite topic is the budget. And the one takeaway that I would like to share with you is that in your budget, this is your opportunity to demonstrate to the reviewer that you are requesting the resources that you need to support your research. So as you develop your research, please keep in mind that what you're proposing needs to match what's in your budget. This is one of the key review areas that a reviewer at NIH or some other federal agency will be examining. So these are the basic 4 components of a budget: direct costs. And it depends, but typically they are salary, wages of all personnel involved, fringe benefits, travel costs, materials and supplies, equipment, dissemination and printing costs, and other direct costs. And the reason I say it depends gets back to the previous information. Some sponsors will limit what is allowable as a direct cost for a certain funding opportunity. Some of them will not let you charge equipment, for example. Some of them will not allow you to use salary and wages. But again, you have many resources available to you to develop proposals or budgets in those unique situations. Indirect costs. These are the costs that are necessary to conduct research within the Health Science Center, but we can't associate them to a high degree of accuracy like we can for a direct cost to a sponsored project. And how do we calculate those? At WU, we use typically, because it depends, a modified total direct cost base. And what that is, that base includes salary, wages, fringe benefits, material supplies, services, travel, and sub-grants and subcontracts up to the first $25,000 of each subcontract or subaward, regardless of the period covered by the subgrant. In that base, we exclude all equipment, the amount of any and all subcontracts in excess of $25,000, patient care, tuition remission, rental of off-site facilities, scholarships, fellowships, as well as the portion, as I mentioned earlier, of each subcontract is in excess of $25,000. And Valerie mentioned on the Office of Sponsored Programs website, our current negotiated rate agreement is there for your use. For example, if we had $100,000 in modified total direct costs and you were doing on-campus research here within the Health Science Center, you would apply 49%, which is our negotiated rate. So your indirect costs in that example of a budget would be $49,000 and your direct costs would be $100,000. Just a brief example. Let's see, cost sharing. Just the takeaway, unless it is required by the sponsor. Please, please, please do not include it in your proposal budget. There are various reasons. Those are resources that are here at WVU. Once you use them, let's say you do include cost share, those resources are no longer available to researchers. And as you saw much, much earlier, 42% of your time is going to be involved in research administration. If you do provide voluntary cost share, a lot of your time in the post-award phase is going to be spent tracking that, and it does take a lot of time.
A couple quick things. With equipment, it has to be $5,000 or greater to be excluded. And we also have a unique situation here at the Health Science Center with salaries. Anytime you have UHA salaries or WVUH salaries, those pieces of salary or that effort cannot be included in the personnel section of your budget, but those portions of salary have to be included under other expense. And we have special language that has to be added to the justification for that. I'm just going to briefly talk about regulatory and compliance. Basically, the institution has an obligation to comply with federal regulations and provide assurances and certifications dealing with all of these things. And when you're talking about humans, animals, biohazards, each of those has their own separate review process. They have their own applications, and you would find the information on that on the ORIC website, which is the Office of Research Integrity and Compliance. And they can help you with putting proposals together for those. We also have to report or provide certifications on lobbying and disclosure of lobbying activities, equal opportunity and affirmative action, responsible conduct of research. All of those sorts of activities, or some of them, are actually reported through the Office of Sponsored Programs or through ORIC. If you have anything involved, any radiation involved, there's a radiation safety component that has to be addressed. And then if you're talking about proprietary work on sponsored projects, you would be dealing with the Office of Tech Transfer. And just a few notes about the Office of Tech Transfer. There are times when you may come to needing either a confidentiality or a non-disclosure agreement signed, some of these non-monetary agreements, or a material transfer agreement. The Office of Tech Transfer is the office that you need to deal with in getting these done. There's also the possibility of teaming agreements that might be needed, and again, Tech Transfer would be the go-to place for that.
So this is where we get to the great part. You as a researcher have received external funds, and we are in the post-award phase. And these are kind of the key components of the post-award phase. Green sheets. Those of you that have been a part of the WU research community know that we like to color code things. So green sheet means you have money. They used to be green, now it's electronic. The green sheet is the form that OSP, the Office of Sponsored Program, provides to you regarding the basic information of your award. The start date, the end date, your award account where you will post expenditures or the person that you designate within your department. Some other key information that you will need as a principal investigator pertaining to your research administration responsibilities. Pre-award spending, that's another, it depends. That requires prior approval from the sponsor, and it will be indicated on your green sheet. Pre-award spending means 90 days prior to your official start date, you can post allowable expenditures to your grant award. So let's say it's for a conference or something that is specifically tied to your research that is an allowable cost, you can post that to your grant award 90 days prior, but again, requires prior authorization. Budget setup and budget revisions. Due to changes always occur. Change is inevitable, of course. From the time that you submit your proposal to the time the award is received by the Office of Sponsored Programs, something may happen. Maybe a colleague left for another institution. Maybe you won the lottery and you need to find another principal investigator or colleague here at WU. Or, for example, I'm sorry, yes? You won the lottery?
Yes.
Awesome, great.
I'm wondering what comes first, the notification of award or the green?
That's a great question. The official award process, we'll get to that in a second, will be OSP receives a notice of grant of award. Common thing is an NGA. Once the Office of Sponsored Programs receives the notice of grant award, they will contact you and work with you as the PI to make sure that there's any pre-award spending and also the budget setup and revisions. For example, I was getting to like NIH. Unfortunately, congressional appropriations are on a decline. NIH, for example, usually, on average, will reduce an award 8 to 10%. Those are just averages before they issue the notice of grant award. So if you were the PI on an NIH award, before the Office of Sponsored Programs will release the green sheet, you would have to adjust your budget to accommodate for that 8 to 10% change. That's a great question, thank you. So great, so then OSP sends you the green sheet and any kind of issues like the basic agreements. Let's say you need a memo of understanding or a material transfer agreement with a colleague at, let's say, at Pitt. All those things need to be resolved, and once they're resolved, the green sheet is issued. So think of green means go. Once the Office of Sponsored Programs and you have worked together as well as departmental people, once you have received your green sheet, then you can proceed with posting expenditures and having the resources available to you to conduct your research. Does that help? Yes?
How does that work with a center grant?
A center grant is another great question. Here within the Health Science Center, we are very unique in that we have centers, departments, we have academic units, and research centers. It's the same process. The Office of Sponsored Programs receives a notice of grant award. We take care of any housekeeping issues regarding the changes from the time you submitted your proposal to the time that the award is made, and once you have the green sheet. On the green sheet, when I talk about the grant award number, it's what we call a POETA account. It's project, organization, expenditure, title. It's a big acronym. But once you have that account number and everything's been resolved, then you have the ability to proceed and start having the resources available to you for research. So a center is different. Yes?
Sometimes the PI receives the green sheet,
Yes.
but our financial office doesn't have it yet.
And that's a great question. I know that is a challenge. I don't speak for the Office of Sponsored Programs. I had the pleasure of working there for many, many years. When the Office of Sponsored Program went to Quality COEUS and some of the business practices to set up that notification, even though you might have been an approver, you're not added to the green sheet. I would encourage you, if that's a concern, to maybe contact, would it be Donna Leary, Contact Val. Val is the go-to person. Valerie has been a valued colleague of mine for many, many years. So
We usually just grant.
historically, that's when it was paper. When the green sheet was actually on green paper, that was possible. But the business practices to deliver that.
That would be set up so with those.
There's actually a hierarchy that's set up in each unit or college, and the business people actually have access to the KC. They don't always all necessarily receive the official email that notifies them that it's there, but they can actually sign into KC and look up those awards.
As you can tell, I'm already fond of the phrase, it depends. For those kinds of issues, Valerie is your best resource. Okay, moving right along, post-award, we cannot conduct research alone. Often we have to work with colleagues at other institutions, other facilities, other research centers. And the way that we exchange resources once the award is made is through a subcontract or a sub-agreement. When WU is the prime applicant, when we are the ones applying and we're subcontracting to external institutions usually, the majority of your time as a faculty member or a PI when it comes to post-award monitoring is monitoring of your subrecipients, and that is kind of a detailed process. Actually, the subrecipient monitoring process begins at the proposal phase, but this is where, want for a better phrase, the rubber meets the road. You as the PI are responsible for making sure that they're participating in your research project to the goals, standards, objectives, specific aims, whatever is in that agreement. Make sure that they're following the scope of work, that they're holding to the budget that we've agreed to, and make sure that the commitment to your research is continuing. And you as a PI will work with your departmental research administrator or other designee within your department to make sure that's occurring. But you as a PI, that's the takeaway that I would like to share with you and stress. You are ultimately responsible for the most part, because it depends, but ultimately you are responsible for monitoring any and all of your subrecipients from your awards. When WU is the subrecipient, we have to adhere to the same terms and conditions set forth that are applied to the prime. Let's say Pitt. I like to pick up, we collaborate with Pitt a lot. So let's say Pitt gets a huge NIH award. They can flow down their terms and conditions into our subaward agreement they signed with West Virginia University. All the federal rules that apply to Pitt also apply to us. So again, that agreement kind of outlines your relationship fiscally, administratively, as well as any technical reports. Okay, we're at the finishing line. You've done a great job. Your research is almost done, and you're thinking, yay. No. There are a few other steps, or a few other responsibilities before you can close out your project as a principal investigator. Again, I can't stress this enough. As the principal investigator, project monitoring and management is key to the success of your proposal. It's much easier to resolve any challenges or barriers if you're monitoring it as it happens than waiting till the project closes out. 90 days prior to the end of your award, the Office of Sponsored Programs Award Initiation Unit will send you a memo to notify that you have 90 days. And actually, if you're monitoring your project and you see that some things just did not work out the way we planned, we need a little more time, what you would do is to request a no-cost extension. In that you are asking the sponsor, I need more time because a colleague left, experiments didn't work, whatever the valid reason is to finish conducting research, but you are not asking for any more money. And it always depends. Some sponsors will not grant a no-cost extension. So again, project monitoring and management is key to your success once you receive your funds. Carryover requests. This is when you have a multi-year project. And if the sponsor allows, if you see that something's, I have $15,000 left, I would like to hire an additional grad student to assist me with my research on this specific AIM 3. That also requires, typically, but it depends, some prior authority or request, and that's a dialogue that you, the PI, would have not only with your departmental administrator, but with the Office of Sponsored Programs. The Office of Sponsored Programs, as Valerie mentioned, is the authorized administrative central unit to negotiate your requests between yourself and the sponsor. And typically the Office of Sponsored Programs and another administrative unit that I haven't mentioned, the Sponsored Research Accounting, will assist you with subaward closeout processes, will help you provide the financial status report. Because when you close out your project, not only does the sponsor request all of your technical reports, but financial reports. And we have finished what Valerie and I had to share with you today. If anyone has any questions, we're happy to help in any way we can. Questions? The option is print my blue sheet, and as a suggestion, if you're always applying, let's say to NIH or a certain sponsor, save it as a template. So if it's always going to be the same PIs, or PCORI would be a good example. It's not that great? Okay, I was trying to promote a bit. That's what I do. It's just then. It's print my blue sheet. There should be, and I do the same thing. I save it, or if there's one that I know, like, what did I answer last year? But it should be there. But if not,
You can always actually go in and access.
any other questions or any questions from Charleston or Lewisburg before we conclude for the day? No? Thank you so much.